Redistricting enters a new phase of chaos. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Julie Carr-Smythe, State House correspondent for the Associated Press, Herb Asher, OSU political scientist, and Terry Casey, Republican strategist. We are 7 weeks from the start of early primary voting, and Ohioans still don't know who will be on the ballot in their legislative districts. The Ohio Redistricting Commission has until Thursday to come up with a third version of the maps of the State House and State Senate districts. Late last week, the Ohio Supreme Court rejected the commission's second set of maps as only a token effort to limit overt partisanships. And in the past few days, state legislative leaders say they can't come up with a congressional map, so they have given that task to the Redistricting Commission. All the while, the May 3rd primary looms and its status appears very much in doubt. Julie Carr-Smythe, one of the goals of this whole new system was to get Republicans and Democrats to work together to come up with a compromise map. Is there any hope that that's happening this week as they're trying to come up with a map for the third time?
My guess is no. We had a scolding by the high court last time, and the map was sent back, and the commission really didn't do what it was asked to do by the justices. They did another party line vote, sent that back, and now here we are. The one motivating factor may be the May 3rd primary, because it is looming, as you say, and they don't really want to have to move that primary. It's not in the Republicans' interest to do so, because they have a really nasty Senate race going on who would want to prolong it, right? And so I think that's the one maybe motivating factor that they would actually get some Democratic votes for the next map.
Terry Casey, do you read the decision by the court? They basically said you need to meet that 54% to 46% Republican advantage among voters in Ohio. You've got to meet that basic breakdown of legislative districts, or they're not going to accept it. Is that the way you read the latest decision?
Well, that's what they say. The problem is the way Ohio's political geography is laid out, with both Republicans packed in certain parts of the state, rural, middle-sized counties and communities, versus Democrats more in urban and certain suburban large counties. It's almost impossible to make that without doing a lot of gerrymandering and violating other sections of the Constitution that talks about keeping counties whole and not unjustly breaking up communities and counties and cities, et cetera. So this is a real difficult kind of thing, because what you could do mathematically on paper doesn't always work out realistically. But we're clearly in uncharted territory. And one of the questions is, who blinks first? Because Maureen O'Connor, she knew in December 8th, when they had their oral arguments, that the February 2nd filing deadline was there and hard. We've already passed that. And what do you do in terms of moving the election, new lines, new filings, people having to move? It's complicated.
Herb Asher, is the Supreme Court ignoring one or two other requirements in favor of this 54-46 political breakdown attempt, which is required in the Constitution?
There are already maps that have been drawn that meet all of the requirements. Not precisely, and when you say 54-46, it could be 56-43 or whatever, but the maps exist. But the Republicans refuse to offer up those maps. This has been a very partisan process. It's largely been driven by one Republican, the Senate president, who's a very talented and very bright person, but he really has been saying the Constitution really doesn't matter in terms of the maps that the Republicans have been proposing. So there are maps out there that I think could get Democratic and Republican votes, then you'd have a 10-year redistricting. Look, the issue here is really not about the convenience of the candidates or the burden that's put on election officials. It's really, will the citizens of Ohio's wishes that were expressed in constitutional amendments that were approved, will those wishes be followed in terms of implementing a set of districts that give people a meaningful set of non-overly gerrymandered districts.
Julie Carr Smythe, why did the lawmakers punt on the congressional map? Why did they kick that to the redistricting commission? Why couldn't they? It all comes down. The lawmakers are drawing these maps anyway. But why kick it to the commission instead of just doing them themselves?
Right. And the court did give them 30 days to do this. And about 5 days out from that deadline, they have said they can't get the necessary Democratic support for an emergency clause. The reason they need an emergency clause on a bill that would lay out the map is because of the May 3rd primary that we've been discussing. A bill normally without that clause takes 90 days to go into effect, and there just isn't time. So the Redistricting Commission, by contrast, acts and its map becomes immediately effective.
Yeah, as long as it passes the muster of the Constitution of the Ohio Supreme Court, gets the 4-vote majority there. Herb Asher, this has been called a game of chicken. How do you think this plays out?
The Republicans should recognize that even if they come up with a plan for the state legislature that's 54, 55, 56, whatever it is, they're still going to win many more seats because the Republican Party is so much better at candidate recruitment, candidate support, fundraising, and they'll still have more incumbents running. So I think it was the first responses were kind of greedy, trying to maximize, but there's no doubt that when all this is done, they're still going to have a healthy majority in the Ohio General Assembly, even if they have a plan that looks like on the face of it, it's 54-45 or 55-44 or whatever.
Yeah. Terry Casey, the Republicans go for that? Do they take that risk? Because a 10-year map, 10 years is a long time. Things could change. Democrats
I'm
could
not sure
gain strength.
there's the votes for a compromise, and don't be surprised that somebody goes to federal court and uniquely, normally they can't go to federal court, but there's a way they can get there. And in these kind of cases, it requires the chief judge of the Sixth Circuit in Cincinnati, who's Jeff Sutton, to appoint a 3-judge panel in order to hear and decide the case. So this could be federal court. Somebody could blink first between Maureen O'Connor and Matt Huffman, but we're definitely in uncharted waters.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch. It looks like we have at least another month to go in this process, and the prospect of moving that May primary, maybe holding 2, which is unlikely, remains to be seen. We'll have to see how this thing plays out in the next few weeks. The U.S. Senate race, of course, only relies on one map, and that's the Ohio state map. The big fight is on the Republican side, and there is one less candidate. Businessman Bernie Moreno, who spent millions of dollars on TV ads, has pulled out of the race. He says he decided to withdraw after meeting with former President Donald Trump. Moreno says they agreed there were too many Trump candidates in the race, and that would open the door for an anti-Trump candidate. Terry Casey, Bernie Moreno, he spent all that money on ads. He was on a lot of TV stations, a lot of TV shows. He wasn't doing too badly, if you can believe the internal polls. Why would he pull out?
Well, welcome to the Ohio version of The Apprentice. And I think the real reason Bernie Moreno dropped out is he spent all that money, saw that he wasn't moving, and he realized that the chances of Trump being kingmaker and picking him was not going to happen. I still think it's in doubt whether Trump will actually endorse in this Senate race because there's too many different people that have got connections to him, and he doesn't want to back somebody who can't win. So right now, Josh Mandel is still the leader because he's got the name ID advantage and hadn't spent any money. We've got a long ways to go, but I'm not totally sure Trump will actually make a decision and pick somebody in Ohio.
Julie Carr Smythe, are any of these candidates doing anything differently to try to separate themselves? I'm talking about the ones who are actively courting Donald Trump's endorsement.
Well, I mean, the sort of unique tactic that Josh Mandel used a couple of weeks ago where he debated Morgan Harper, the Democrat, I think was an appeal to Donald Trump of sorts to basically say, I'm young and I can I can take Democrats on directly and do well with it. And so there's that. But, I think mostly they're using to the president. They're trying to read the tea leaves and just figure out what's going on.
Yeah, I'm guessing that the Mandel campaign sent a DVD or a link of that debate to Mar-a-Lago and to former President Trump. Herb Asher, what do you make of all this? Does this open the door, as Bernie Moreno said, for an anti-Trump candidate? I guess it would be Matt Dolan, the state senator, to sneak in.
Favor a pro-Trump candidate, but it's interesting. Now Mike Gibbons has a big TV ad buy with the endorsement of Rand Paul. And I'm not sure in a broader electorate, maybe among the Republican right wing, that helps you. But I think, that what's happening here is that at least starts opening the door for a stronger Democratic performance in the general election. I mean, if you really have to go so far to the right to, in fact, win this primary, and I'm really thinking here of Josh Mandel and Mike Gibbons, not Dolan and not Timken, then in fact, maybe you're opening the door for the Democrats to steal a seat away.
Terry Casey, J.D. Vance, according to Politico, is slipping in internal polling. The ads bringing back his old sound bites of him criticizing, being sharply critical of Donald Trump, apparently have hurt him. Would he have been wise to have not been maybe anti-Trump, but just be more down the middle? Should he have taken that course instead of trying to join the vocal supporters of Donald Trump?
Maybe. I mean, his people view that, yes, they've been hit with millions of dollars of attack ads, but they feel they've still got a base. The question is, for them and for the other candidates, how do you knock down and attack Josh Mandel and bring him down and bring them up? And that's a difficult thing to do, because in primaries, especially Republicans in Ohio, they don't like it when you attack somebody else. So this is a very slippery slope, and clearly millions of dollars have been spent and millions more will be spent. The question is, what messages will actually affect and motivate voters in a positive way to help your candidate?
Julie Carr Smythe, in other states, we have seen some softening in the at least the enthusiastic support of former President Trump. Does this endorsement mean as much now as it would have meant maybe 6 months ago or a year ago?
I think that's a good question, because definitely he has tended to endorse in situations where, as Terry implied, it already is a foregone conclusion. And I think that's what he's trying to do now, is figure out who has got the best chance and then be sure to be behind the horse for his own purposes, as opposed to the other way around. And we obviously saw this past week some mainstream Republicans taking on the RNC, beginning to speak about the insurrection being violent and not being fake, and the election not being stolen. And those are gradually narratives that are taking some traction in around different states.
Yeah, most notably Mike Pence saying that the president was wrong when he said he could have overturned the election, which was a bold statement by him. Herb Asher, on the Democratic side, we can assume that the Republican candidates are going to debate. They've debated a few times already. Tim Ryan has been less enthusiastic about debating his challenger, his competitor, Morgan Harper. Do you think those two will debate, or do you think Tim Ryan will just sort of stay the course?
I don't know, really. I think Ryan now has more of a reason to say, hey, look, Morgan's already participated in the debate with Josh Mandel, which was a wonderfully bad stunt, if you will. So he doesn't have to debate her. But the question really becomes, I think, on the Democratic side, what happens with Cranley and Nan Whaley? I think that's the more interesting question about debates.
Yeah, and those two have been pretty civil towards each other, at least of late. So we'll see how that turns out. As critics in states start to lift their mask mandates, things remain basically the same here in Ohio. Of course, there is no statewide mask mandate here, but some cities have mask mandates for indoor public places. Columbus is one of them. The mayor's office says the mask mandate will remain in place until Franklin County turns yellow on the CDC's transmission map. We're still red, as is most of Ohio. Red means a high rate of transmission. Ohio has a few orange counties, which is a substantial rate of transmission. Yellow would be a moderate level of transmission, and no place in Ohio qualifies for that. Herb Asher, yes, we still have a high rate of transmission. We are still red. but so is Massachusetts, so is New York, so is California and Oregon, all states that are lifting their mask mandates. Why is Columbus waiting for the CDC all clear signal?
Because that gives them cover for a decision. But what's interesting, it's happening nationally, is that whether you call them blue states or red states or whatever, there's a growing convergence to easing mask mandates. And I think what this really is demonstrating here is that a lot of the response to the COVID epidemic has really been driven by the states. We're a federal system. And where the federal government has tried to impose certain kinds of things, in a few cases, they've been slapped down by the courts. So these are largely now going to be state decisions. And mask mandates become less relevant if you have a population that's highly vaccinated. But if you don't have mask mandates, and it depends whether you're talking about the workforce or schools or whatever,
Yeah.
but if you don't have mask mandates and the vaccination level is low and the contagion rate is high, that's a prescription down the road for more hospitalizations and more deaths. But I think we're seeing here fatigue is setting in. States are saying, and I think, Maryland and New Jersey and New York, California are saying, hey, look, our numbers are down so much, we now can relax these mask mandates.
Yeah, right
And
now,
that becomes, I think, a more common policy across the country.
Yeah, right now in Franklin County, we're at 295 cases per 100,000 population. To get down to this moderate transmission level, we need 50 cases per 100,000. So we got a little ways to go in Columbus if the city sticks to that benchmark to get rid of the masks. But Julie Carr Smyth, as Herb mentioned, it's Democrat governors who are lifting the mask mandates, probably because of fatigue and the plunging cases.
Right. And I mean, the Omicron variant is the vast majority of cases now, and it is not sending as many people to hospitals. It's not killing as many people. And one of the big motivators for restrictions around the vaccine have obviously been saving lives, but also huge demands on the healthcare system. Balancing that against business interests and voters who have to come out and don't necessarily not necessarily going to be happy with politicians who are limiting their personal life, is what these politicians are after.
Yeah, Terry Casey, I mean, you can see the Columbus, look, we take the mask mandate off now and then another variant comes out a month from now, we got to put it back on. Is it safer to go slow? Because they really haven't been, terribly aggressive in enforcing the mask mandate in the city of Columbus.
Well, I think the more relevant indicator is not cases, but it's what's happening in hospitals and ICUs. And I think things are becoming more manageable there. And you also forgot to mention probably the first Democrat governor to move to more of a let's learn to live with it instead of trying to shut everything down was the Colorado governor. So clearly the trend is out there, and there's no way we can stop COVID totally 100%. We've got to manage it better. But clearly there's a shift happening, and it has been interesting to see the other Democrat governors move and catch up with the Colorado governor.
Herb Asher, do you see some kind of mask mandates remaining in place? I'm thinking like on airplanes or in healthcare facilities, hospitals, even after COVID is largely gone. Do you see some institutions keeping a mandatory face mask policy?
Yeah, I think the private sector and the healthcare sector will still have the ability to impose mask mandates. Cruise lines may ease up their mask mandates, but they still will maintain their vaccine mandates. And remember, any of us, and we citizens, we can choose to wear a mask even if there's no longer a mask mandate. And that's really been the actual practice in many cases right now. Even where there's a mask mandate, as you said, Mike, it's not being really enforced very much. But if people want to wear a mask, they certainly can.
Yeah, I think air travel, you used to see some folks wearing masks all the time, even well before COVID. And certainly folks from Asia who have gone through this many times, it's part of their culture to wear a mask. So that could be part of our culture from now on. Our final topic: after the nuclear bailout scandal and admissions that First Energy bribed the former chairman of the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio, there were loud calls for a shakeup on the PUCO. Well, that is not happening, at least not with the latest appointment. Governor DeWine has renominated Daniel Conway to another 5-year term. Conway is a longtime utilities lawyer who was first appointed to the commission in 2017. Critics say DeWine should have looked outside the Ohio energy industry for this appointment. They point out Conway holds an investment in the company tied to the nuclear bailout. The governor's office calls Conway fair and judicious and points out he voted against a major First Energy request 2 years ago. Julie Carr Smythe, this is the battle at the State House all the time with this commission. You need experts, but to get experts, you have to go to the industry, and that shuts out consumers and people who don't have an intimate knowledge of the utilities.
Right. And I think that in this case, DeWine may have chosen to bow to the pressure to do something a little different. But the Democrats are coming forth this year in this election cycle trying to make HB 6 and the scandal a huge issue. And so if the governor were to say, okay, we need to change the way we do things, it would almost be an acknowledgement that things went wrong under the Republican regime. So, probably balancing that was part of the calculus there. But you're right. I mean, this is a very, very difficult and particular industry, regulation of energy. We could do better probably to have a consumer voice on there that's truly a consumer voice, and to have a balance of rather than having folks who have these that have potential and business ties.
Terry Casey, where was Mike DeWine in a no-win situation here? If he appoints an outsider, he's admitting there's a problem. But if he appoints an insider, he gets criticized for maintaining the status quo.
You're right. It's impossible to make everybody happen. But if you look at Dan Conway, and I know and have worked with his wife, he's a very solid guy. And he actually, as a commissioner, voted against one of the issues that favored First Energy. But people forget the Public Utilities Commission is not just electric. It's also telecommunications, railroads, other issues. And these are very complex technical issues, not just within Ohio, but like on electric, we're part of a 13-state region. So you got to have some people on there that really understand it and can ask the right questions and push the staff to do the right things. So I think this will work out because he's represented consumers also, and again, voted against First Energy. So people made their point, but you got to have people there that know what they're doing.
But on the other side, Terry, if sometimes a fresh perspective, say you get somebody who is smart, who's a quick study, who may not be intimately involved with electric deregulation and laws of physics or telecommunications, but someone who is smart, a quick study, maybe could bring in a different perspective. Wouldn't that be also valuable on this commission?
That would be valuable. And over the course of time, the governor has there's 5 appointments to be made. But I think this one in particular is going to be approved because when you look at his technical background and his record, he knows what he's doing. And if I go to a medical doctor, I want somebody that knows what they're doing and has had experience performing the procedures that are so important to you.
Herb Asher, what's the politics here? Is it impossible for a governor to appoint somebody who's not tied with the energy industry?
No, it's not impossible. You may antagonize some of your major donors, your major supporters, and things like that. But look, we know for years PUCO has been considered highly flawed. We know that First Energy has been a problem child for a long time. So Mike DeWine had the opportunity to appoint somebody different. Now, I think as Julie said, well, maybe that would be an acknowledgement that things aren't all that good. But what he's really done is given the Democrats a further opportunity to try to come up with something that's actually called utility and regulatory reform and build upon not just House Bill 6, but build upon a whole variety of other issues where one could legitimately argue that the interests of consumers have not been adequately protected. The notion, I mean, Conway may be very talented, but the notion that he's the only person who could do the job, nonsense.
All right, we
There's
got to get to our
many
final
people
off the
out
record parting shots, and we will start with Terry Casey. Go ahead, Terry.
About 6 months ago on this show, I said inflation could be a very big issue in 2022. And now this week, it's even more clear. We've got the worst inflation in 40 years. And unfortunately for the Democrat Party, people understand gasoline and grocery prices, and that's not a good sign for the Democrat Party.
All right, Herb Asher, you're next.
I think one impetus for a compromise on redistricting for the Republicans is that there's a lot of turmoil going on redistricting, on the Senate primary, and now nationally among Republicans, I should say, who are not happy with Trump. And so I think, they might like to bring some calm to this issue and come up with a compromise and blink sooner than later.
All right, Julie Carr Smythe.
I was just going to say, looking ahead, as we often do, I don't know exactly what to predict for Thursday. We've even heard them say they don't believe the deadline is Thursday to get this map fixed. And so really, I think it's going to be anyone's guess, and they're probably deciding in the moment right now and feeling pretty unpredictable.
All right. If you live in Columbus, you're likely still driving on snow-covered streets. Well, the Columbus Dispatch reported this week that the city considers a side street serviced after a storm if a city pickup truck drives up and down the street and packs down the snow. That's good news for teenagers and spouses who have had to get up before dawn to shovel their driveway. Now we can just drive our cars out and call the job done. No more shoveling, servicing. That's Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online. See every episode on demand at WOSU.org. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.